The Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles holds 8,000 people when every seat is taken. On the night of March 14, 1983, every seat was taken. The occasion was a charity gala hosted by the Hollywood stunt community, a formal evening of recognition and raised glasses. The kind of room where men who had spent their careers absorbing other people's punches arrived in jacket and tie and pretended, for one night, that they had always lived this way. The air was warm. The chandeliers were on full. The tables near the stage were occupied by names that belonged on marquees, and the tables in the middle and the back were occupied by the people who made those names possible. The coordinators, the trainers, the doubles, the practitioners of the disciplines that kept cinema honest. Chuck Norris was seated at a table in the fourth row, not the first, not the second, the fourth. He was wearing a plain dark jacket over a white shirt, no tie, and a cap he had not yet removed. He was 42 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall and 181 pounds. He was sitting with two men from his fight team and a woman who coordinated second unit work on his last production. He had not touched the bread. He was watching the stage. Arnold Schwarzenegger was 35 years old that night. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall and 235 pounds of documented muscle, not theatrical muscle, not cosmetic mass arranged for a camera angle, but functional, competitive tissue built over 20 years of systematic effort. He had won the Mr. Olympia title 7 times. He had won the Mr. Universe title 4 times. He had completed 4 films with a 5th in production. He had trained in martial arts for 6 years under 2 different instructors. He spoke with the confidence of a man who had never entered a room and lost it. And he had not, until that evening, ever been given a reason to believe that would change. In 11 seconds, with 2 movements that covered a combined distance of less than 4 feet, something would happen in that auditorium that 8,000 people would spend the next 4 decades trying to describe accurately. Nobody in that room understood what they were about to witness. Nobody except the man in the 4th row with the cap still on. This is the story of that night. Arnold Schwarzenegger arrived at the shrine at 7:43 in the evening, which was 17 minutes before the program was scheduled to begin. He arrived, the way he arrived everywhere in 1983, with a presence that moved ahead of him through the room. A change in the atmosphere that the nearest people felt before they saw the source of it. He was not yet the figure he would become 3 months later when Terminator entered production. He was something more interesting than that. He was a man in the exact moment of his ascent, certain of where he was going, impatient with anything that stood between his current position and that destination. He had been training with a former Korean national team fighter for 14 months, 3 mornings a week, 2 hours each session in a private gym in Brentwood. He had learned to throw a hook kick with genuine accuracy. He had developed footwork that was not decorative. His instructor had told him, at the conclusion of the most recent session, that he was approaching competitive amateur standard. Arnold had thanked him and decided the instructor was being conservative. He had seen Chuck Norris twice in professional settings. The first time was on a soundstage where Norris was completing dialogue coverage, and Arnold had passed through the corridor without stopping. The second time was at an industry dinner 14 months prior where they had exchanged 12 words across a table and nothing further. What Arnold had formed from those 2 encounters and from everything he had absorbed about Norris's reputation was an assessment. It was the kind of assessment a man forms when he has been the largest person in most rooms for his entire adult life and has learned to read other men through the lens of physical comparison. He found nothing in that comparison that concerned him. The program began at 8 o'clock. The evening's host was a veteran stunt coordinator with 40 years in the industry. A compact man named Gerald Feld, who had the weathered patience of someone who had organized dangerous things and kept them from becoming catastrophic. He welcomed the room, acknowledged the charitable purpose of the evening, and invited the first of 4 presenters to the podium. The third presenter was Arnold Schwarzenegger. He approached the podium at 8:31, accepted the microphone from Gerald Feld, turned to face 8,000 people, and smiled the smile that belonged on a poster. He had prepared a speech of approximately 4 minutes. He delivered 3 minutes and 45 seconds of it exactly as written. What followed was not. He spoke about the stunt community with genuine appreciation, about the specific physical courage required to make cinematic violence look honest. He spoke about his own training, carefully and without excessive detail, in a way that made clear he understood what real physical preparation required. He was good at this, at the language of effort, because he had spent his entire adult life in the vocabulary of effort. The room was attentive. Several tables were nodding. Then he paused. It was a performer's pause. Calculated, the kind of breath a man takes when he is about to say something he has considered and decided to say out loud. He looked to his left, toward the fourth row. He looked directly at the man in the plain dark jacket and the cap. He said, "We even have Chuck Norris with us tonight. Chuck, take a bow." He waited while a portion of the room turned and found the fourth row. He waited until the attention had settled. Then he said, with the smile still fully in place, "You know, I was just thinking, with everything Chuck has done on screen, all those fights, all those kicks, I think if we ever went for real I would be done in maybe 30 seconds. He paused again. A portion of the room laughed. "Maybe 35 if I tried the hook kick." More laughter. He raised his glass in what he intended as a collegial toast and added, "What do you say, Chuck? Does 30 seconds sound about right to you?" It was not a question. The inflection made that clear. It was an invitation to participate in the joke, which was also an invitation to confirm its premise, which was also a measurement being taken in front of 8,000 witnesses. The table in the fourth row was quiet. Gerald Feld, standing 6 feet to Arnold's left, set both hands flat on the surface of the podium, and did not move them. A journalist named Patricia Welch, seated at table 11 in the center of the room, had her pen in her hand. She did not write anything for the next 40 seconds. She held the pen over her notepad and watched the fourth row. A stunt coordinator named Ray Tello, seated at the table directly adjacent to the fourth row, later described what he saw this way: the man in the dark jacket looked at the stage for approximately 4 seconds without changing his expression. Then he reached up and removed his cap. He folded it once along the brim. He set it on the white tablecloth in front of him. He looked at the cap for one moment the way a man looks at something he is setting down, because he no longer needs to carry it. Then he stood up. He did not stand up quickly. There was no urgency in it. He rose the way a man rises from a table when dinner is over and the evening has reached its natural conclusion. He straightened his jacket. He looked at the stage. He said, at a volume that was audible to the 4 nearest tables but not to the room at large, "Let us find out. If you have been watching this channel for any amount of time, you already know that what Chuck Norris said next mattered more than what happened next. Stay with this until the end." The sentence he would speak from the floor of that auditorium would become the most repeated sentence in the private vocabulary of everyone who witnessed it. But first, make sure you are subscribed. And drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight, because this community has built itself across 6 continents, and we want to know where you are. He walked toward the stage from the fourth row. The distance was approximately 40 feet. He covered it in 14 steps, at the same pace he had used to cross every room he had ever entered, which was the pace of a man who has nowhere to be that he is not already going. The crowd began to understand. The understanding did not arrive all at once. It moved through the room in sections, beginning with the tables nearest the fourth row and traveling outward toward the walls, the way a current moves across still water when something is dropped into it. By the time Chuck Norris reached the open space in front of the stage, approximately 3/4 of the room had gone quiet. Arnold Schwarzenegger was still at the podium. He had not moved. He was watching the man approaching from the fourth row with the expression of a person who has said something in a language he believed was theoretical, and has discovered, at close range, that the other person is a native speaker. He was 6 feet 2. He was 235 pounds. His left hand was on the microphone. His right hand was at his side. He had trained for 14 months under a credentialed instructor who had told him he was approaching competitive amateur standard. All of that was true, and none of it was relevant yet. Chuck Norris stopped at the base of the stage. He looked up at Arnold Schwarzenegger for a moment that lasted approximately 2 seconds. The room was producing the specific silence that only 8,000 people choosing not to make a sound can produce. A silence with weight and texture. A silence that costs something to maintain. He said, "Come down." 2 words. Level, not raised, not unkind. Arnold Schwarzenegger set the microphone on the podium. Gerald Feld did not reach for it. He stepped down from the stage using the 3 steps to the left of the podium, the same steps he had used to ascend 4 minutes earlier. He was 3 inches taller than the man he was now standing 6 feet from, and 64 pounds heavier, and 14 years younger. Those facts did not rearrange themselves into a different configuration, simply because the context had changed. They remained exactly what they were. They simply stopped being the most important things in the room. A fight is not 2 men deciding to strike each other. A fight is a conversation about distance, conducted in a language that has no alphabet, only positions. The man who controls the distance controls the terms of the conversation. And the man who controls the terms of the conversation has already determined the outcome before anyone has moved. Chuck Norris had understood this since 1964. He had been teaching it since 1967. He had now stopped teaching it for 12 seconds in order to demonstrate it. The distance between them was 6 feet. Arnold Schwarzenegger took 1 step forward. It was a natural step, the step a large man takes when he is preparing to close distance, and it was the correct step within the logic of every physical encounter Arnold Schwarzenegger had ever had, because in every physical encounter Arnold Schwarzenegger had ever had, his size and the closing of distance had been the same instrument. He took the step and the distance became 5 feet, and he brought his right hand up in the beginning of a position his instructor had spent 14 months teaching him. Chuck Norris moved left. It was not a step, it was a shift, a redistribution, a change in the relationship between his weight and the floor that covered less than 8 inches of lateral space. Arnold's right hand arrived at a position that was 6 inches outside of anything it had been aimed at. Nothing connected. Arnold had not yet thrown anything. The miss was structural, not tactical. The 6 inches of empty space existed because the target had performed a geometric rearrangement that the technique could not accommodate. Gerald Feld, at the podium, had not breathed. Ray Tello at the adjacent table had leaned forward over the white tablecloth with both forearms flat against it. Patricia Welch had still not written anything. Arnold Schwarzenegger adjusted. This was the second thing that was true about him, and that mattered. He did not stop. A man who stops after the first moment of confusion is a man whose training exists only for the moments when confusion has not yet arrived. Arnold's training was real enough that he adjusted. He brought his weight back through center. He reassessed the 6 feet that had become 5 feet that had now become, through the lateral shift, 5.5 feet at a changed angle. He located the man he was standing across from and identified the new position. He committed to a second approach. He did not block it. He did not deflect it. He was not there. The second attempt moved through space that contained nothing because the man it was aimed at had redistributed himself again, this time forward and to the right, inside the geometry of the attempt rather than outside it. Which meant that Arnold's reach had extended past Chuck Norris rather than toward him, and the 235 pounds of documented muscle were now committed to a direction that the target had vacated before the commitment was complete. From the side of the room, from the witness tables, from any of the 8,000 positions occupied that evening. What this looked like was a very large man making 2 powerful efforts at a direction that had ceased to contain anyone by the time the effort arrived. It did not look like evasion. Evasion implies running. This was not running. This was geometry. This was a man who had spent 19 years understanding which space was safe and which space was not, and who moved only as far as was necessary to ensure that he remained in the former and never entered the latter. Arnold Schwarzenegger made a third attempt. It was the best of the 3. His instructor in Brentwood would have recognized it. It was a committed lateral drive with the left shoulder forward, the kind of movement that, if it connected at full commitment against a man of 181 pounds, resolves most arguments about what happens next. It did not connect. It connected with nothing because Chuck Norris had moved backward, not far backward, not retreat, but the precise amount of backward required to create 6 inches of clearance between the left shoulder and his own chest, which was 6 inches more than the technique needed to work and 6 inches less than Arnold had expected to find. The third attempt extended into empty space and did not stop where Arnold had intended it to stop, which meant that the 235 pounds were no longer entirely in balance, which meant that the 181 pounds had, for the first time in 11 seconds, a position of advantage. Chuck Norris did not take it. He had the angle. He had the position. The finishing technique would have been a short rear hand strike to the jaw pulled back to nothing. A demonstration rather than a damage event, the kind of thing that would have ended the demonstration in the clearest possible language. He did not throw it. He stepped back instead. He created distance. He put 4 feet of air between himself and the man who had used the microphone to issue an invitation in front of 8,000 people, and then he stood in that 4 feet of air and waited. Arnold Schwarzenegger straightened. He took 2 full breaths. He looked at the man standing 4 feet away from him and saw what Ray Tello later described as the specific expression of a person who has asked a question and received an answer he had not considered among the available options. He was not frightened. He was recalibrated. There is a difference. Fear produces noise. Recalibration produces silence. Chuck Norris extended his right hand. Arnold Schwarzenegger looked at the hand for approximately 1 second. Then he took it. They shook once, the kind of handshake that has no performance in it, nothing for the room. Then Chuck Norris leaned forward and said something. He said it at a volume that traveled no further than Arnold's ear. No one in the 8,000 seats heard it. No one at the adjacent tables heard it. Gerald Feld, 6 feet away at the podium, heard nothing. Arnold Schwarzenegger nodded once. His expression did not change in the way expressions change when a man has been shamed. It changed in the way expressions change when a man has been corrected by someone who had no interest in humiliating him with the correction. He walked back to the podium. He retrieved the microphone. He looked at the room for approximately 3 seconds. Then he said, without the smile this time, without the performance, 30 seconds was generous on my part. He set the microphone back down. The room, which had been holding its collective breath for nearly a full minute, released. Patricia Welch wrote something. She wrote it quickly. While the sound of 8,000 people returning to themselves filled the Shrine Auditorium. What she wrote was, he had already lost. He simply had not known it yet. Ray Tello left his table as Chuck Norris was walking back toward the 4th row. He stepped into the aisle and placed his hand briefly on Chuck Norris's shoulder as he passed. The way a man makes contact to confirm something he is still processing. Chuck Norris did not stop walking. He reached the 4th row. He sat down. He picked up the cap from the white tablecloth. He held it in his hands for a moment without putting it back on. He did not tell the story afterward. Not that night, not in any documented interview in the years that followed. The story spread from 8,000 other positions in the room. It spread from Gerald Feld, who mentioned it in passing at a production meeting 2 days later, and from Patricia Welch, who included 3 sentences about it in a profile she was writing about a different subject entirely. It spread from Ray Tello, who told it at his own retirement dinner 16 years later, and had to stop twice in the telling because the room kept interrupting him with questions. It spread from the stunt coordinators and the double work practitioners and the people who made other people's names possible, and by the time it had traveled through enough rooms, it had accumulated small additions and shed certain accurate details, the way all oral history does, the way all true stories eventually become something slightly larger than what happened, and something no less true for it. The detail that survived every version without alteration was the sentence Chuck Norris said into Arnold Schwarzenegger's ear. Arnold Schwarzenegger disclosed it in 2007, in a conversation that was not recorded, but was witnessed by 2 people who corroborated each other's account a decade apart, without being aware the other had spoken. The sentence was 7 words. It was, "You are better than you think you are." That was all. No threat, no lecture, no inventory of what had just occurred. 7 words that acknowledged the effort and declined to use the moment as a mirror. It was the opposite of what the moment offered to a man who had won and could have spent the winning however he chose. The fork in the road stands in front of every man who loses a public reckoning. One direction is the careful excuse, the reframing. The construction of a version of events that requires no acknowledgement of what actually happened. The other direction is the honest account, the open-handed recognition that something real occurred, and that it was instructive. Arnold Schwarzenegger chose the second direction. He did not choose it immediately. It took him 9 months, during which he returned to his instructor in Brentwood and began the training again from a different place. Not from the position of a man approaching competitive amateur standard, but from the position of a man who had learned the distance between what he understood and what the subject actually contains. He said once, years later, in a context unrelated to that evening, the most dangerous thing in any competitive situation is the belief that preparation has made you ready. Preparation makes you capable. Readiness is something that only the situation itself can confer, and it confers it on the person who has spent more time in it than you have. Whether he was speaking about that evening at the Shrine Auditorium or about something else entirely has never been confirmed. The words fit regardless. The lesson that 8,000 witnesses carried out of that room on March 14, 1983, was not the lesson of the 11 seconds. The 11 seconds contained only technique, and technique is merely the visible surface of something that runs considerably deeper. The deeper thing was what the cap on the tablecloth meant. A man who removes something he has been wearing and sets it down before he rises is a man who has already decided how the next several minutes will end. He is not removing the cap in order to see better. He is removing it because he will not need it for what is about to happen, and he knows this with the same certainty that a man knows the weight of something he has been carrying for 19 years. The story a man tells about himself in a room full of people who are watching, and the story the room tells afterward about what they saw, are two different documents. Only one of them is written in a language that cannot be revised. That night the man in the fourth row wrote in the only language he had ever used for the things that mattered. He wrote it in 11 seconds and said nothing afterward, and let the room carry the translation for the next 40 years. Next week we will talk about the evening in Tokyo in 1979 when a Karate Federation chairman told Chuck Norris that no American would ever earn a standing ovation in that room. We will tell you exactly how long it took, and we will tell you what the chairman said to him when it was over. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it. And drop a comment below telling us what you thought of tonight's story. We read every one.